Hi all, I have another fascinating game to show you from TCEC, Season 19, Premier Division, Round 17. Leela playing with the white pieces against Scorpio, Neural Network, not Scorpion, but Scorpio Neural Network. So it's a neural network battle. The opening scenery set d4, g6. So the modern defense, or Robash. Bishop g7, knight c3, we see c6, knight f3, d6, bishop e3, knight d7, bishop d3. It looks nice and interesting, symmetrical, the two bishops, the two knights. Knight gf6, both sides castle. Queen d2, this seems logical for bishop h6. We see b5, and this is the end of the book, given. And Leela's first choice here is h3. Yeah, taking time out to deprive the use of the g4 square from black. If, for example, e5, then maybe black plays like this, knight g4, and you can see e5 under great pressure. This positional kind of pawn sack may be best, but it doesn't seem to do much. Black plays knight ge5 perhaps. That's one of the stronger options, and it should be just an even position. Okay, so no real damage done with that kind of thing. So h3, it seems conservative, and white is still aiming potentially for e5. Black played bishop b7 here. You might think, well, why doesn't black play e5? That's one question I had. Perhaps it kind of weakens the adjacent light squares subtly here. For example, d takes and a4, trying to get this c4 square for the bishop might be an interesting idea, an interesting try. The knight can neatly go to g3. White can play c3. This is just a fictional scenario, but you can end up potentially with the bishop being on c4, the knight's being in quite an aggressive position relative to the king. White has a big advantage here technically. Maybe black was loath to play e5 because of such a simulation. So we have actually the move bishop b7 being played. This is an invitation for white to play e5, and the knight retreats. So here it's interesting. We can't really maybe we can't keep the wedge after bishop f4. Maybe black plays to close up the position with d5 or has some other tricks, but for whatever the reason, this pawn wasn't supported. Actually, e takes was played. And you might think, does this really give white something? Knight takes d6. Okay, the knight's not on f6. It might not be supporting h7 that much. If e takes was played, rook fe1, white has a small edge here as well. Okay, so for the moment, it seems dynamically nearly balanced. Rook fe1, and we see a6. And now a4. And we see rook e8 here. Again, if we play b4 for black, it weakens c4, which might be a consideration. But there's another positional consideration here. This c6 pawn could be quite a nasty target later positionally. For example, let me just show you an example where it ends up that c6 is a problem. In endgames like that, it's a bit of a torture position, this kind of scenario. So anyway, we see black not committing b4. I mean, it could end up in positional trouble. So rook e8. Now we see knight e4. Knight takes e4. You might think, if knight f5 is that good, hitting the center, maybe bishop g5 here and reinforcing with c3. And if c5, maybe white takes on b5, takes on c5. And after the dust settles, it seems as though white's winning e7 pretty non-controversially. So yeah, there are some issues here. So after knight e4, we have knight takes e4, bishop takes, and now knight b6. And you might think, well, this pawn's under fire, right? And no, Leela's not playing fire, but the pawn is under fire. Should it be protected? In fact, this is where it gets kind of interesting. What would you play here if you had this position with white? So 5 seconds maybe, or 10 seconds to pause the video if you want to analyze this. Or is analysis the right tool here? Should you be thinking more fundamentally? But anyway, take a few seconds. Okay. Okay, bishop h6 was played. Now, in Simple Chess by Michael Steen, he says the pawns are like the fundamental constraint of the pieces. Now here, Leela's giving up the pawn. And are these pieces going to be less constrained? In fact, are they going to be like angry with a vengeance? We could even say, you know, taking pawns maybe sometimes creates what seems to be like angry pieces. And even when you have angry pieces, even the most solid structures like triangles, pyramids, could get under fire, you know. And maybe that's the case here. So black did nab the first pawn. So technically, the accountants will like it. It's an extra pawn, right? Okay, but if black played bishop h8, maybe b3 is actually going to be played, for example. And if knight c4, the queen can go to f4. And there's a target here on f7, which is quite comfortable for white sometimes. So say this to try and relieve some pressure, but white stands better. And there are actually scenarios where c6 is picked on. For example, here you can see c6 being picked on and dropping off. There's some fictional scenarios. It's interesting how solid black's position is in general. So anyway, bishop h8, yeah, might lead to b3. If we just have a look at that again, just for a little bit of insight potentially, instead of e5, if knight d6, knight e5, if white's prepared to give up that light square bishop here, that's okay as well. But if the bishop's preserved, this is looking good anyway, with an advantage for white. So interesting scenarios. But knight takes a4 is the greedy option. So are the pieces going to become angry? As the Incredible Hulk says, you don't want to make me angry when he's a normal person. So taking one pawn, yeah, okay. And we see here the guardian angel of the dark squares being removed. Is that a bad sign? Can white actually create common squares out of either f6 or h6? Well, knight e5 does give the idea that the knight could actually pivot back and support the queen on h6 here. So maybe there's a brewing king safety issue. You'll notice here there's only one pawn also on this third rank. So if there's any virtue of the wear opening with one a4, it's sometimes to switch a rook to the king side. Is that the case here, that there's rook lefts, e3 and a3 come to mind here in this position? And also you might think, hold on, there's another pawn here to be taken. And in fact, Scorpio did take it. 2 pawns. Is there enough compensation? Well, rook a b1, this rook's kind of maybe getting angry here. And if knight c4, there is a clear punishment, just taking and then taking the bishop. So the knight has to go to the rim again. The knight on the rim is dim, as they sometimes say. So knight a4. And we see c4, which gives the idea that actually an option for white sometimes, not maybe here because knight takes c5, but sometimes c5 will blunt that bishop. And I remember a classic game of Hammer when he did this to beat, I think, Neil MacDonald in one of the London Classic FIDE Opens. He first played on the queenside to kind of lock in the opponent's queenside bishop, and then he went on the attack later. And it left a great impression on me. That's why I'm mentioning it. This kind of positional considerations before going straight into an attack mode with, say, rook b3. So this is a very interesting little positional finesse here instead of the immediate rook b3. The immediate rook b3 doesn't seem actually that bad to go into straight hack attack mode here. For example, queen d6, rook f3, and this triangle, this pyramid, isn't so solid under some circumstances. For example, knight g4, and if here then queen h6, it's starting to creak. I know that's a third pawn, but here it's definitely creaking. If f takes, we take on f8, and in this position, white ends up, being well off, actually, doing well there. So anyway, rook b3 does seem actually plausible, but c4 was played, which does give some extra positional options under the right circumstances when there's no knight takes c5. So we have queen d6. Here, if rook c8, in fact, can you see what white can play in this position? It's rather interesting. White has a very interesting attacking resource for the attacking player's manual. if I give you 10 seconds to pause the video, what would you play with white here? There is something here. Okay, knight takes f7, and if takes, the queen can go to h6, and it is trouble for black. For example, like this, with the rook left, and then c5 is possible, and then this is actually rather devastating. This doubling of rooks, combine and win on e7, and there's all sorts of nasties here. For example, here there's rook f3. What does black actually do? If queen g7, then bishop d5, and you can see the combine and win effect. The battery of the rooks just crashing through. Yeah, it's rather nasty, this scenario. Just doubling the rooks here, actually, in this position, believe it or not. If e6, oh sorry, that was in the variation. So queen g5, bishop d5, yeah. So anyway, queen d6 was played. And now, actually, in this position, knight g4 was deemed the most effective way. So this does mean queen h6 is on the cards. C5, you know, just knight takes c5, it's pinned. So knight g4, we have king g8. And now knight h6, interesting. If the king goes to h8, there's knight takes f7, check, winning the queen, for example. So king g7, we have rook b3, so very interesting rook left. Rook f8, and now knight g4. Here, if rook g3, it turns out actually maybe black can defend, it seems, for a moment, after bishop c8. And if h4, maybe take another pawn. So, not sure what the punishment is there if black's controlling f5 with bishop c8. So, anyway, knight g4 was played, and we have king h8. So it's a critical moment. So king h8, you might think, isn't that a slow defensive move? As a token move to see what's going on here, if rook ac8, then c5 is possible, because we've always got queen h6 now on knight takes, and then taking the knight. So say here, then the rook can lift, and black gets smashed. Bishop takes g6, and rook takes e6. This is actually, yeah, again, this key move queen e3, believe it or not. It not only creates common squares, it creates access to e5, a nice central square, and the knight can come with a classic mate on h6. You know, when there's a king on g8, there's knight h6 mate in that configuration. If black tries to stop that kind of pattern, then it just loses the rook. So it's a disaster, this, after queen e3. Yeah, interesting stuff. So, yeah, it seems defense resources limited here. Okay, king h8. We have this move, which is intriguing, you know, rook g3. You'd think, what's the point in targeting a triangle? I have seen this in a classic game of Raymond Keane, actually, in an isolated queen pawn scenario. He did put a lot of pressure on the pyramid of on the opponent in one of his classic Hastings games. It's only a certain amount of strength. It's not infinite strength, this pawn triangle. We have knight c5 being played. Okay, still exploiting the pin. If instead b takes c4 here, it turns out knight e5, and here the triangle, yeah, is really tested. Wallop, bishop takes g6, knight takes g6, check, queen h6. It's just crumbling. For example, like this, winning the queen because of the pinned pawn. It starts to crumble there. That was b takes c4. If f5 is another example, then knight e5 is strong. For example, like this, and you can see black's king safety is with its limits, essentially, and its limits are being torn to shreds here. So, yeah, there are limits to that king safety triangle. So knight c5 was tried here. And the bishop just retreats. Knight e6, at least that looks like one defensive piece to help the king, right? Knight e5. And we have now, this is another key defensive position. black plays king g7. Here, yeah, it looks as though this is a waste of time, isn't it? But if b takes c4, then queen h6. Yeah, king's stopping this when it plays king g7. And in this scenario, guess what white plays here? Okay, I'm not going to give you that long, but bishop takes g6. The triangle is just disintegrated. Knight takes f8, discovered check. And it's just a massacre. Yeah, it's absolute crushing. And if we instead look at knight takes d4 here, queen h6, this is dangerous after rook takes g6. And again, the triangle is disintegrated. And f6, just for the record, well, knight takes is just asking for it clearly there. Okay, so those are examples of how this pyramid around the king it's not that solid sometimes. So the king's in self-service mode, stopping queen h6. But now, guess what white plays to pile on the pressure to reignite the h6 square? Combine and win on h6, I dare you. What would be the move to try and do that? If you were playing white, and I give you 10 seconds to pause the video, how do you combine and win essentially on h6? I like the expression combine and win. It's become my favourite addition to the pin and win expression, which I also find useful during my own games. So combine and win move is rook e4, yeah, because you're going to be playing rook h6, and they're combining strength against h6, so they're giving them, the pieces a new opportunity on h6. So yeah, rook e4. Now black played a piece sack in desperation. Knight takes d4. I think the writing was on the wall now for Scorpio to play this piece sack. Before we get into it, if rook h8, c5, say, and if queen d5 here, then rook h6, rook h4, and then bishop a2 is crushing. That's not very good. And if the queen goes back more sensibly, you might think, then what happens here is horrible after check and mate. So here, just to illustrate a bit further, if f5 in this scenario, then combine and win on h6, and here check, and then bang, rook takes g6, queen takes, and also for the record, king h8, queen h6, and rook h4, and black's desperate to stop queen h7 mate soon. So yeah, it seems that black desperately now sacks a piece after the greed earlier. But can the greed in an endgame be like connected past pawns? That's the question here. It's interesting. After queen takes, we have the queens coming off, rook f8. So black has a few pawns, right? We have the rooks doubling. That forces, unless black wants to concede d7, another pair of rooks off. Now a5, so there's two connected past pawns, but c5, so that makes sure it's not going to be free connected past pawns anytime soon. And now after f6, rook d7 hitting the bishop, f takes is played. So yeah, very, very interesting scenario. If king f8, then we just take, if king f8, we just take the bishop, and then this is fine for white. So rook d7, f takes was played, and now taking here and taking the bishop. There's two connected past pawns, but the interesting thing here is after rook b6, white plays now bishop a2 check, it's got a really interesting point here, and this is instructive for endgames actually. If you have an endgame with a bishop on b1 and two pawns like this, it's not usually a good sign, especially in bullet chess, because in that situation they're going to play a2, and usually they're going to win because they're queening a pawn. The bishop's kind of hopeless. Once you move the bishop, it just queens on a1, right? Now, you might think, well, what's the significance of this in conjunction with bishop a2? Well, here, the thing is, as soon as b4 is played, after this king moves, by the way, the bishop can hop out. And you might think, so? Well, have a look now. After this, check, rook takes h7, And the bishop's in a fine blockade square. Black dare not play a3 because we've got a blockade on b3, right? We'll be able to, take b3 if it's sacrificed and take here and just win the rook and pawn ending by that stage. So black tries b4, not a3. But now we have the rooks coming off. You might think, well, how can the bishop cope here? Well, there's key moves here, actually, which all win for white. Guess what white plays as an example against these two passed pawns? Because if you don't do anything, it's easy to lose, right? So 10 seconds to think about your endgame technique here. What would you play in this position? Okay, the bishop gets out of there actually while it can. It could have been anywhere, I believe, on the diagonal. So this means, basically the implication here is a3, we have the blockade, bishop b3. And so b3 was tried. Yeah, if we had played g4, that would be a blunder. b3 and a3, and black's winning because of a2. So bishop c4 is neat. So b3, and then we have h4. So we're ready now. b2, we can meet it with bishop a2. So this is just gets enough time at least to get a queen over here. So it's queening time over there, and the bishop drops back. Nicely handles the two pawns. Black, yeah, underpromoted tonight. Leela ignored it, actually. So, and it went on a little bit till the checkmate here. Okay, I thought it was an interesting game. Now, ScorpioNN is not like an AB engine. It's got a neural network component, and it still went into kind of materialistic pawn grabbing mode, winning two pawns. So it did kind of make the pieces angry. I don't know if that's a great way of seeing it. You could see it more scientifically. Pawns are the fundamental constraint of the pieces. Or you can say, sometimes maybe you can put a positive spin when you're losing some pawns on the queen side to consider, your pieces as potentially getting angry now. They can use the possibilities to get a rook left somewhere. And even triangle structures get challenged, as we see in this game. The seemingly solid triangle is disintegrating in numerous examples that we've seen here. So the double pawn sack concept seems very interesting from the evidence of this game. Okay, really interesting chess being played, really dynamic, aggressive. Who would have thought an engine competition like this produces such exciting, dynamic chess? It's unbelievable. So if you, by the way, I've done a new course on Udemy, Kingscrusher TV /opening tango. I hope you can check that out. It is a reduced discount at the moment if you follow that link till the end of the month. And I'll sometimes put super duper discount codes. Watch out for that as well. But there is quite a decent discount code until the end of the month already. Yeah, it's a really great course. I use the opening with black continually, so I might even be adding components to it. It's my working repertoire with black actually right now, so that's very interesting and close to my heart, that course. There's also the bit.ly/Leela chess playlist there. I put my finger in the right place. There. bit.ly/Leela chess. There's also bit.ly/Stockfish chess. There's also the Suave Kingscrusher TV /Discord chat forum. And if you want to invite me for a game at Chessworld 5 days a move, just go to bit.ly/Chessworld or Kingscrusher TV, register at Chessworld, and I'll be able to invite you for a game soon after. Comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes with the notification bell, really appreciated. And remember, when you like the video, you're feeding the neural networks of YouTube, the algorithms. So we're in an algorithm world. So please do like the video and share it, etc. Thanks very much.